Welcome back to IELTS 9. Today we are going to take a look at some reading questions from the TOEFL test. And more specifically, we are going to focus on sentence highlight or sentence simplification questions. So to begin, let's go to TOEFL.page. And from the menu at the top, go to TOEFL, TOEFL Reading, and Sentence Simplification questions. To keep this video short, I'm going to skip the information here. I highly recommend reading it before you start answering the questions. And then again, you can pause the video and come back to it later. Do the quiz first on your own, see how it goes, and then for an explanation of the questions, you can come back and watch this video. And if you enjoy the questions, you can also purchase the full quiz with 100 questions, and it gives you lifetime access. This one only has 20 questions, 20 of my favorite ones. These are the ones that I use a lot in the classes. Now let's see. Some are based, also to add, some are based on the official guide to TOEFL IBT, 6th and 7th edition. The others are just using those materials as a reference point and are created by me and ChatGPT, of course, to match the difficulty and the tone of the test itself. Now, you could also just use ChatGPT, but I have to let you know that it's extremely unreliable. So it makes mistakes almost all the time. So now but you could use it as a free source. So let's see. For these type of questions, I highly recommend not reading anything except the highlighted portion of this passage. And I have included them to give you an organic type of passage and some context. But for the question itself, when you're in the test, I highly recommend not reading anything else, because sometimes some of the options that you have include information that is true from those parts. And when you think back, also you're trying to save time, so I assume you're under some pressure. You think back and you remember the information as true, but then you forget that it wasn't in the highlighted portion. So for these questions, just focus on, God damn, it's been a long day. Just focus on the highlighted section. Now let's see. Most of the time, these sentences have 2, 3, 4 components, and our job is to break it down and understand it in the easiest way possible, not in a scientific way. Now, let's see. Let me make sure that it's recording correctly. Okay. So let's begin. Though often described simply as plants making food, photosynthesis is a complex biochemical reaction essential for life on Earth, providing the foundation for most food chains. So 1, some people describe it as plants, quote unquote, plants making food. Okay. 2, it is very important. And 3, it is very complex. Okay, we have everything that we need. Now let's see. When you come to the options, again, I recommend not reading the options before you summarize the sentence for yourself. This keeps it simple and it doesn't confuse you with too much information. Photosynthesis, often simplified as plants making food. So yes, that part is correct. This is number 1. It's actually a complex process. Okay, that's also true. Vital to life and supports most food chains. Okay, so that's it. That includes everything that we need, 100%. Sometimes the correct option doesn't have all the information, but it has the highest amount compared to the other ones. So A has to be the answer. But let's take a look at the other options. Photosynthesis only involves, pay attention to words like this, only involves plants producing food and doesn't affect other life forms. That's false, based on the information we have here. And also that changes the sentence completely, of course. The process of photosynthesis is mainly important because it releases oxygen into the atmosphere. Now, there are some things wrong with this one. First of all, it says the main reason why it's important is because of something. We never said what the most important reason is, or the biggest advantage, or the biggest flaw, or whatsoever. So, and then it includes information from the part that is not highlighted. So that's another reason why this is a bad option. D, photosynthesis is a simple reaction, false, where plants create food directly from sunlight without chemical changes. Now that's probably also false, but I'm not going to go back and check. You don't need to. Even if it was true, it would still be a bad option. Now let's see. 2. Among these, we can assume it's about birds because we also say some birds. So between the birds, some of them, and let's see, 1. Among birds, some of them, certain bird species display remarkable abilities to mimic sounds from their environment and even human speech, which researchers believe helps strengthen social bonds and improve survival. Okay, so among birds, Some of them are really good at copying sounds from people and other sources, but I don't really think that's an important part. If it is, we can come back and cross-reference it. Which researchers believe helps strengthen social bonds and improve survival. 2. This helps birds socialize and survive. So, let's see. Some birds imitate environmental and human sounds. True. And this ability is thought to help in social bonding and survival. That is correct, 100%. So that's going to be the option that we choose. Birds mimic human speech mainly to confuse. We don't know why they do it, and we don't know the main reason they do it. Immediately you can, because of mainly and because it actually mentions a wrong reason for it. We actually know they do it to socialize and to survive. Now you could say indirectly maybe their survival depends on confusing the predators. But remember, this is a highlighted sentence question, so you don't have to change the information. Actually, you shouldn't change the information. For inference questions, that would probably be wise to do, but not here. Only a few bird species have the ability. No, we didn't say that it's a small number. We said some birds. We didn't specify if it's a lot, if it's some of them, or it's just a small group. Researchers have concluded that all birds, no, we didn't say anything about all birds. We just said some birds. So immediately you can go with A. Let's see. Also, I have to mention that this quiz is randomized. So you don't get the questions in the same order, but you get the same 20 questions. But the industrialization of book production proceeded more rapidly in the United States, where the market by the middle decades of the century was not only larger than in Britain, but also apparently more sensitive to price than to quality. So they cared more about price than to quality. Perhaps because elite readers constituted a smaller proportion of book buyers. Let's break it down. Also, just by reading it correctly, you are going to have a better understanding of it. So let's do it this way. This is something I do with a lot of students, and almost always it makes it easier for them to understand. But the industrialization of book production proceeded more rapidly in the United States, perhaps because elite readers constituted a smaller proportion of book buyers. So, book industry, let's just call them books, or let's just call it book industry, grew really fast, or grew more quickly in the US, I assume compared to the Britain. That's mentioned in the parentheses. We didn't read it this time. In the US than in UK. 2. Probably, pay attention to when the text says likely, probably, perhaps, maybe. So we are not sure. And sometimes the options they give you actually says, for example, this happened because of that. And that means we are sure. That's a factual statement. But we don't know. Probably because most of the readers were not serious book readers. They were hobbyists, let's say. Okay, now what else? And 3. Now let's see what we have inside the 2 commas here. Where the market by the middle decades of the century was not only larger than the UK, but also more sensitive to price. So, US market, bigger than UK market. And 4, US people prioritize price over quality. Okay, now we have what we need. Let me make this bigger. Okay, the American book industry's larger market and commitment to low prices prevented it from selling books that were similar. No, we didn't say they couldn't do it. We just said they preferred to not sell high quality books. Also, I don't think that's true. Probably a British person wrote this. Now, not me. Industrialization of book production occurred more rapidly in the US. That is correct. That is number 1. Let me actually make this a little bigger. Perhaps, I like that, because of the large markets and low prices that were common in the 19th century. Now, this one is grouping US and UK and the whole world actually together. That's not how we mentioned it. We said US was actually different from UK. A larger market than in Britain, and the greater demand for cheap books, true and true. This is 3 and 4 basically. In the US contributed to the faster industrialization of book production. This is correct. Now it says contributed. And it doesn't say it was the main reason for it, but let's see what we have in D. Also, just give me 1 second. Okay. The industrialization of book production occurred more quickly in the US than in Britain because the elite readers in the US were not as sensitive to quality as elite readers in Britain were. So this is mentioning the quality part. So now I give you some time to think about it. D is mentioning 4 and also mentioning 1, that it grew more quickly. C mentioned the larger market and greater demand for cheap books, so 3 and 4, and also mentioned 1. But it didn't say probably. But also it didn't say it was the only reason. It says contributed, so there could be other factors as well. And B, industrialization of book production. I mean, obviously I chose the answer to save some time. We can go to the next one. Let's see. Also, let me just make this, I could just go full screen, but it doesn't change much. So let's see. In order for the structure to achieve the size and strength necessary to meet its purpose, architecture employs methods of support that, because they are based on physical laws, have changed little since people first discovered them, even while building materials have changed dramatically. This is one of my favorite questions. This is from the official guide to TOEFL IBT 6th edition. I think 7th edition also has the same passage. They didn't change anything in the 2 books. And I am pretty sure they cannot issue a copyright strike because of something like this. But we can only hope. I did receive an email from Cambridge. Now, but I'm on the student's side and my own side, obviously. So we'll see how it goes in terms of copyright issues. Now, let's begin. A building, like buildings, have specific purposes. To achieve that purpose, they need a specific size and strength. Okay. 3, to achieve the purpose, architects use, also I am not sure if the keyboard sounds are too loud for you. I apologize if they are, because the microphone is quite close to the keyboard. Architects use some methods, and 4, those methods are based on physical laws. 5, physical laws never change, and therefore methods don't change much. Now, just to cover something here real quick, because some students ask about this, because when we get here, I tell them that this sentence technically means that the methods haven't changed, almost. And then they ask me why. We actually said they have changed little. And that is a common misconception between little and a little. So to make it clear, we can go with a simple sentence like, I have little time. And I have a little time. Also, to emphasize the right meaning, we can say it this way. I have little time. And I have a little time. So this one, what follows is, also, let's say in both situations, you have 5 minutes. So the time is not going to change, the amount of time that you have. But in here, you are implying that it's not enough. I should go. And in here, you are implying that it's not a lot, but it's enough for what we are talking about. So let's have another cup of coffee. So in here, when we say that methods of support have changed little, it basically means they haven't changed. Or they have, but it's negligible. It's not really, the amount of change is not something that we need to worry about or even pay attention to. And then 6, that's why in here it says, even when building materials have changed. So that the reason we can use even in here is because we are saying one thing didn't change, but the other one did. Or one thing changed just a little, but the other one changed dramatically. Materials have changed a lot. Now let's see. Unchanging physical laws have limited the size and strength. No. Immediately you can remove that because we never said that the laws have limited the size. We just said buildings have size and strength. Building materials have changed in order to pay attention to words like this. Now, and then ask yourself, in here, when we said materials have changed a lot, did we answer why? And try to answer that. Why did the materials change? And the answer is you don't know because it's not mentioned, at least in the highlighted part. So that means this is wrong because we never mentioned the reason why they changed. You could make assumptions, but in this type of questions, that will be wrong. You shouldn't make any assumptions. Now let's see. When people first started to build, we didn't talk about the beginning of history, like the first buildings that people made. We just said that we mentioned something about first. People first discovered them. Them meaning, let's see, let's go back a few steps. Architecture employs methods of support that because they, you could also get a question like this. They refers to what? Well, methods of support are based on physical laws, have changed little since people first discovered them. So discovered what? Now that's a good question for you. Is it physical laws, or is it methods of support, or is it something before that? You can think about that one. I think that's actually a question in the book as well. I'm not sure. I don't remember this one specifically. I think this is practice test 2. I don't really remember, but it's in the official guide to TOEFL IBT, both editions, 6 and 7. Now let's see. So not this one. D, unlike building materials, the methods of support used in architecture have not changed over time. That is promising so far. So it says the methods of support have not changed. We know that. So these methods are based on physical laws and they haven't changed. And also, unlike building materials. Now, on its own, it doesn't mean anything, but this means this is the opposite of methods of support. So if they have changed, building materials, the other way around. If methods of support haven't changed, then building materials have. Because they, meaning the methods of support, are based on physical laws. That is going to be correct. Now let's see. While solar and wind energy are praised for their low emissions and decreasing costs, their dependence on weather conditions can limit reliability without effective storage solutions. Okay, so this one is relatively easier than the previous one. Quote unquote, green energies. It's all a scam. Green energies are clean and cheap. Of course they are. But they depend on weather conditions. Basically, this is a disadvantage. So it's a flaw. Not a flaw, but it's a disadvantage compared to the other sources. And 3, without good storage, they are not reliable. Okay, so now let's see which of our options match this. Solar and wind energy are affordable and clean. Okay, but rely on weather. True. So they need storage systems to be dependable. 100% correct. Includes everything that we needed. Solar and wind energy are cheap and always reliable. No, they're not always reliable. We said the opposite. The main drawback or disadvantage of solar and wind, I would stop here because we never said the biggest or the most important or the main disadvantage. We said it is a disadvantage, but we never said if it's the biggest or the least important one. Could be either one or just one of them. Solar and wind energy are praised mainly because, now this is, again, you should ask yourself, I didn't write it, but let's call that 0. People consider them very good. And then ask yourself, why? And we didn't answer that question. And not only we didn't answer it, not only that is a problem, also it says mainly because. So we should have at least 2-3 different reasons. And then the most important reason is this. And that's also false. So there are many reasons why D is a bad option. So let's go to the next one. The key factor in the success of these countries, we don't care which ones, and I'm going to skip what's inside parentheses to make it easier to read. The key factor in the success of these countries was their ability to adapt to the international division of labor determined by the early industrializers and and to stake out areas of specialization in international markets for which they were especially well suited. Now, even reading it is difficult. So let's see, let's start with this. These countries were successful, at least in this context. 2, their success was because of A, let's put it here, A, it says, along with high literacy, which contributed to it. So one of the reasons is lots of people could read and write. That is literacy. And it was a high rate, meaning a lot of people were literate. Was their ability to adapt? So it was the ability to adapt to something. And the something is International Division of Labor that was determined by the early industrializers. So let's call that one, adapt to International Division of Labor. And then later can say International Division of Labor was, also that's not an official acronym or initial for it. I'm just using it to make the notes shorter. Ideal was set by earlier peoples or people. So societies. And using this, they were able to find their market niche. Niche basically means they were really good at it, and it was a specific part of the market. So they found their audiences, let's say, or customers. Since the early industrial powers dominated the global economy, meaning because these nations had to, we never said that the early industrializers dominated the economy. These countries, helped by widespread literacy, yes, so most people were literate. It says helped by. It doesn't say that was the main reason. I like this option so far. Found success, became successful by adjusting or adapting to labor systems shaped by early industrial leaders, correct? And by, I said using this, they were able to do it. But that's also, you could call it the other reason. I have to think more about that one. And by identifying export areas suited to their strengths. That actually sounds like a very, very good option. Strong literacy helped these countries reshape the global division. Now, without even continuing, the main reason was not literacy. So an option that starts like this is probably not going to be correct. These nations were fortunate that the labor system set up by the earlier powers matched their strengths. That doesn't make sense because they had to adapt to it. And if they had to adapt, it means initially they were not. Initially, it wasn't good for them, but they changed something. They changed themselves or whatever that the change is. We don't know. I'm not going to get into the details of it because honestly, I have no idea. But they had to change, so it wasn't initially good for them. So let's begin. Let's move on. If the consequences of some changes, such as cutting forests and filling in lowlands, have been deliberate and purposeful, to open the landscape and create sweeping vistas, for example, other human undertakings, such as mining and dam building, have produced results neither anticipated nor intended. Now, this one confused one of my students a lot yesterday, so let's go over it because I can see why it would be really confusing. So let's say, if the consequences of some changes, ignore the examples, have been deliberate and purposeful, ignore the other examples, other human actions, ignore the examples, have produced results neither anticipated nor intended. So let's just go with the main idea without mentioning any examples. Some. Also, I don't think there should be an if in there. Some human actions. It does make sense in a literary way, in an academic way of writing. But let's say some human actions have been deliberate. Of course, the actions are deliberate, but let's say some human actions, some of the consequences we face, we meaning humans, are I don't know. This is not the best way to say it, but let's put it this way: intentional. And two, some of the other, or some of the consequences, let's just repeat the same thing, we face are unintentional. I think that makes it simple enough. Again, even if you don't understand exactly what is happening, just by doing this, you are going to be able to get to the right option. Now then, we have examples of the consequences, we have examples of the actions that are intentional, and examples that are unintentional. So now let's come back to the options. Some If we need the examples, we'll go back and cross-reference, but for now we don't. Some changes to the land have been made to improve the landscape, and others have been made for economic reasons. We never mentioned the type of actions that we are doing, so that some are intentional or have unintentional or expected consequences, some have unexpected consequences. While human beings intend to improve land when making changes to it, we never said what their intentions are. And also that means all of them are positive, all of them are done with good intent. We don't really know. Of all the changes made by human beings, those made to forests and lowlands have been the most deliberate. No, we didn't say which type of action is the most or least dangerous or good or bad or whatnot. While the consequences of some changes to the land have been intentional, others have been unexpected. This is very good. And you need to know some of the words here. So deliberate and purposeful are similar to intentional, something that is by design or expected or done consciously, so you want it to happen. And the opposites would be unintended, unintentional, accidental, not anticipated, unexpected. And the options are using synonyms to basically test you for vocabulary as well. Growing fat on the salt subsidy, Venice merchants could afford to send ships to the Eastern Mediterranean, where they picked up valuable cargoes of Indian spices and sold them in Western Europe at low prices that their non-Venetian competitors could not afford to offer. Okay, let's see. 1. So these people made a lot of money from salt. That's the first part, growing fat on the salt subsidy. Growing fat in here is just talking about fat cats, and in that sense, meaning a fat cat is technically an elitist person who has a lot of money, or an elite billionaire, let's say, or a billionaire in total. Like, in cartoons and Hollywood movies, they always have the archetypes. So they made a lot of money, and they could send ships to Mediterranean. Let's call it M for now. I don't want to write the whole thing. To pick up spices. 3. They could sell them at really low prices. And 4, we don't know low, but at really good prices, let's say. And 4, other merchants could not compete with their prices. Okay. Non-Venetian merchants prefer to trade in Indian spices rather than salt. No, we never said what they prefer. We never said they prefer salt to spices or vice versa. The salt subsidy allowed Venetian merchants to sell Indian spices in Western Europe at cheaper prices than their competitors could. It's very good. So it doesn't include that they got rich from salt. It kind of mentions salt subsidy, but it says it allowed them to sell Indian spices. It doesn't mention the ships going there. To sell Indian spices in Europe, that is true. At cheaper prices, that is true. And their competitors couldn't compete with those prices. That's also true. So this is a very good option. The expense of shipping heavy salt cargoes, first of all, we never said anything about the weight being heavy or light or whatnot, to Western Europe convinced merchants. No, we never said that the salt changed their mind. We just said it allowed them to do this. By sending ships to the Eastern Mediterranean and Western, I'm not sure why I'm reading it. We can actually move on to the next one. So let's see. Although her early theatrical career had included stints as an actress, she was not primarily interested in storytelling or expressing emotions through dance. The drama of her dancing emanated from her visual effects. This is also from the official books. 1. It's rewritten, so it's paraphrased. Now let's see. 1. She had some storytelling in her early work. 2. She wasn't interested in storytelling. 3. She was interested in, or let's say she used visuals for dramatic effect. Now let's see. She was more interested in dance's visual impact than its narrative or emotional possibilities. It is true. Doesn't include her past work, but it is true. Used visual effects to dramatize the stories and emotions expressed in her work. She wasn't really expressing emotions or telling stories. So this one is connecting the two, which are not connected. She believed that the drama of her dancing was because of her emotional style of storytelling. She wasn't storytelling. She focused on the visual effects of dance, her focus on visual effects was because of her early theatrical training as an actress. Now, this is an interesting one because it says the reason why she was interested in dramatic effects was her early work. But we never said that the early work made her interested in visual effects. Quite the opposite. We said actually her early work was mostly storytelling works. But you could assume that, okay, because it was storytelling in her early work and she didn't like it, she decided that she is more interested in visual effects. But that jump in logic is something that you cannot do for highlighted sentence questions. In inference questions, you definitely have to do something like that. I forgot what the what options I was going for. Was more interested in dance's visual impact than its narrative abilities, capabilities. Now, the Whigs were strongest in the towns, cities, and those rural areas that were fully integrated into the market economy, whereas Democrats dominated areas of semi-subsistence, that's a tough one, or semi-subsistence if it had a hyphen, farming that were more isolated and languishing economically. Two things only, mostly. Let's see, one, Whigs were strong in towns, cities, and it says rural areas. So let's refer to that as villages. And it's not the best way to do it, but let's call them and villages that were that had good economies, good market economies, let's say. Again, you don't have to be correct or accurate, just have to simplify it. And because for this type of question, it doesn't really matter if you understand all of it or not. Two, the Democrats were strong in farmlands and farming areas, basically, and villages that were isolated, let's say, and poor. Instead of saying suffering economically, we can just say poor. So we have two groups. Each one has its own domain. Now, the Whigs had the most influence in developed commercial areas. True. While the Democrats were stronger in more isolated regions that relied on subsistence farming. It said semi-subsistence, so that part I don't like, but it's relatively true. The Democrats were strong in farmlands without the market. Whigs were strong in areas with the market. But let's see if we have a better option. The political divide between Whigs and Democrats reflected a basic split. No. Split meaning half, cut in half, or basically a similar or almost equal share. Whig dominance in the market economy led to increased isolation of Democratic voters? No. One is actually changing or affecting the other. And it's important for you to pay attention to how these two things are connected, or if they are connected at all. And they're not in this case. We are just saying Whigs control these areas, Democrats control those other areas. So any option that makes a connection between the two, you have to remove. The Democrats held sway in poorer, less connected regions. That is correct. While the Whigs flourished in economically integrated and urbanized, meaning towns and cities, areas. That's actually a very good option. 11. Seawater surrounding a coral is very rich in dissolved calcium carbonate, but the fluid inside the polyp cannot retain a large quantity of calcium carbonate, so it is laid down as microscopic needle-shaped crystals beneath and around the polyp. What does that mean? We don't know. Honestly, this is why I became a teacher of English, because I couldn't understand any of the stuff that I was studying in school. So, one, the water around seawater surrounding corals. The water around corals has lots of, let's call it CC. Two, water inside polyp cannot hold lots of CC. As a result of two, it stays out. I'm getting that from beneath and around. So it is laid down beneath, meaning under, and around the polyp. So it stays out and under stays around and beneath the polyp. Again, you don't have to be accurate with that one. Now let's see. CC from surrounding seawater is stored inside the coral polyp in the form of crystals. Actually, we know that the crystals were outside, so this is going to be wrong because it says inside. Since only a small amount of calcium carbonate can be stored inside the coral polyp, this is correct. It is also stored outside it. It is also stored outside it. Pay attention to that one. Again, we just said, actually we did say that it could also be stored inside, but not a lot of it. Said it cannot retain a large amount, but that means it probably can keep a small amount in it. Now let's see. The fluid inside the coral polyp is richer in calcium carbonate than the water around it, than the surrounding crystals. Actually, that doesn't make any sense based on the highlighted part. Calcium carbonate doesn't exist in crystal form. That's definitely wrong. So I forgot A and B. I should first choose the correct answer before I move on. So let's see. From surrounding seawater is stored inside. Wrong. Since only a small amount of calcium carbonate can be stored inside, it is also stored outside. That should be the correct one. Now, it doesn't include the information about the water around it, but that's fine. Sometimes they don't give you 100% of the information. Estimates indicate that aquifer contains enough water to fill Lake. That was Angel shaking her head. She has an allergy to tree pollen. What kind of an animal has an allergy to trees? I don't know. But enough water to fill Lake whatever. But unfortunately, under the semi-arid climatic conditions that presently exist in the region, rates of addition to the aquifer are minimal, amounting to about 0.5 centimeter a year. Okay, let's see. 1. Estimates. Pay attention to that. So we are not sure, but we are guessing. The numbers show that A for aquifer has enough water, has lots of water, or more than enough water. 2. Unfortunately, so this is a disadvantage of whatever topic we're talking about, or a flaw, or something going against it. Sadly, the weather is dry, somewhat dry in that region. So, because of the weather, the amount of water coming in or being replaced is small, or little, or low. And 4, actually that's just the amount. So we can just say 0.5 centimeter per year. I don't know if that's how they write it, but who cares? Now, even though the aquifer holds a massive volume of water, I mean, yeah, it was a lot of water. Very little. You can pay attention, similar to the architecture one. Very little means it's an amount that is not enough. It's being added to it each year due to the region's dry climate. That actually sounds like a very good option. The aquifer currently adds only 0.5 centimeter of water annually, but over time, it is expected to hold enough to... No, it already has enough water. This is changing the whole idea. The region's current climate adds water to the aquifer every year. Yes, although the amount is very small. But yeah, this is not what we are talking about. We're not talking about the amount being added. That's not the main topic. The dry climate of the region has led to a steady increase in how much water is added. No, we said the amount is actually pretty low because of it. And it's constant. We never said it changed. We never said it went up or down. So let's begin. Let's move on. Since the laws of physics, not some arbitrary decision, have determined the general form of applied art objects, they follow basic patterns, so much so that functional forms can vary only within certain limits. Ooh, this is similar to the architecture one. I actually used ChatGPT to generate this one. So, general form of AAO, applied art objects, is determined by laws of physics. Okay. They are not random. And 3, they are limited in their range or variety, let's say. because of the laws of physics. Now let's see. Functional applied art objects cannot vary much, correct, from the basic patterns determined by the laws of physics. That would be a very good option. The function of applied art objects is determined. We never talked about their functions. We never said what they are doing. So this is playing on words with functional and the function of something. Since functional applied art objects vary only within certain limits, arbitrary decision cannot have determined their general form. This one is actually making an assumption. So we are saying because we know this thing, because we have some fact that functional applied art objects can only vary in a limited range, then probably, or we can say then with a high degree of certainty, we can say, oh, it's not even high. It's definitely making a factual statement. It's impossible for random decisions to determine their general form. That's not what we said. The general, we can skip this one. Let's see. Initially resisted by European scholars who were skeptical of a symbol representing nothing, zero eventually gained acceptance through the translation of Arabic mathematical texts, becoming essential to arithmetic, calculus, and computer science. So, pay attention every time you see in initially or in the beginning and so on. So at first, European EU people didn't like zero or the idea of zero. 2. Later, they accepted it. Why? Because they saw it or they read it in translated text. 3. This formed the foundation of sciences that followed. Okay. Obviously we don't say sciences, but again, we don't need to worry about it that much. And although it was first discovered in Europe, no, it wasn't discovered in Europe. So the idea of zero was initially, at first, doubted by European scholars, correct, but later it was adopted by them, that is also correct, after they encountered it in translated Arabic text, correct, eventually becoming vital to many areas of math and science. When you have an option that is this correct, 100%, it includes every piece of information that we needed, and it says it correctly. Almost verbatim is the same thing. You can choose it without paying too much attention to the other ones. I'm going to press next because I have a class coming up soon. Many ecologists now think that the relative long-term stability of climax communities comes not from diversity, but from the patchiness of the environment. An environment that varies from place to place supports more kinds of organisms than an environment that is uniform. Uni meaning one, form meaning shape. So all parts of it look the same. And the patchy environment varies from place to place. It looks different in each part. Now let's see. Some ecologists now argue that ecosystem stability is primarily the result of species diversity rather than habitat variation. We didn't say that the stability of the ecosystem is the result of species diversity. Quite the opposite. The species diversity is because of the stability. God, I need some water. Just give me 1 second. Out of coffee, out of water, and with just one class left. But then it's dinner time. Environments with patchy place-to-place variations usually have lower species diversity than environments that are uniform. That's false. No, actually, they have a higher level of diversity. Uniform environments are unlikely to develop into climax communities because they fail to support as many species as patchy ones do. We never said that one cannot be the other. We actually said, what we said was, one of them has more types of animals and one has fewer. So this is not going to be the correct answer. I don't know why I clicked on it. According to many ecologists, ecosystems with more variation tend to be more stable. True. Because they can support more diverse forms of life. Also true. So they have different places for different types of animals to live. And that's why they have more. And this is the reversed form of A, technically. A is actually just switching the place of what causes what. Now let's see. Now I hate the red here. I wish I hadn't done that. Hills. Also yesterday I just closed the class while the student was still speaking, which made me feel terrible. And then the student didn't respond after that when I apologized for accidentally closing the lesson. And I hope she sees this. Now, hills and mountains are often regarded as the epitome of permanence, successfully resisting the destructive forces of nature, but in fact, they tend to be relatively short-lived in geological terms. So basically, what we're saying is, one, we think of mountains as permanent and basically as a sign, as a symbol of permanence, but they are not. Also permanent, the adjective, anytime you have ENT, you can change it into a noun by using ENC. So permanence would be the noun, like confident and confidence. ANT and ANC are also correct, like important and importance, significant and significance, and so on. Now, sometimes the question uses one form, then the options use the other. So, but actually, they are not. They are relatively short-lived. Now, it's very important that you say relatively because they're not short-lived. Maybe they live millions of years, but compared to other stuff that live, I don't know, hundreds of millions of years, that's going to be relatively short-lived. So it's a very important piece of information here. Now, let's see. When they are relatively young, no. You never said something happens when they are young or when they are old. Although they seem permanent, I like it because it starts by saying they seem permanent, but hills and mountains exist for a relatively short period of geological time. That's a very good option. Hills and mountains successfully resist the destructive forces of nature, true, but only for a short time. Now, this is one reason why I said pay attention to relatively. This one says a short time, which you could make the case for, but still, this doesn't mention the fact that we assume they live for a long time, but they are short-lived. So B is a better version of this. Hills and mountains resist the destructive forces of nature better than any other type. No, we didn't say that. Now let's see. Although the nucleus is of the order of a few kilometers in size, the diameter of the coma may be tens or hundreds of thousands of kilometers. The tails typically extend out tens or hundreds of millions of kilometers away from the coma. So this one, a lot of students seem to struggle with this, but honestly, it's one of the easier ones if you think about it correctly. So one, we mentioned the size of one object. So let's say n is large. And then we have the other one. Let's call it D. Or not, let's not call it D. The coma is larger than the nucleus. And then we have the tail. Tail is largest. So the test is just giving you three different objects and their size and how they are related. One is large, one is larger than the previous one, and one is larger than both of them, making it the largest. So let's see. The diameter of a coma is also we are talking about comets, the flying rocks, let's call them, is usually larger than the tail. No, the diameter is not. Also, this is diameter, coma, is not larger than the tail. This is wrong. So basically what we have is n smaller than d, smaller than t. The diameter of the nucleus, coma, and tail of a comet exhibit minor differences in size. We said they are different. Now, I mean, is the difference major? Is it minor? We don't really know. Saying that the difference is small maybe makes sense if we have some reference, but we don't. Saying it's relatively minor could make sense, but again, it changes the information here. Remember, this is not summarizing the sentence. We want to give the same information as the highlighted sentence. And also, let me see if I'm still recording. Oh, I am. It would suck if I wasn't. So the nucleus is reduced in size, while the coma and tail extend far. No, it's putting one in one group and the other two in the same group. In a different group, meaning. Comet tails are much larger than the coma. Okay, so the tail is larger than the coma, correct, which is much larger than the nucleus. Okay, this is actually good. And let's see. Humans likely first understood that seeds could provide a reliable food source through farming when they noticed plants growing in discarded waste or abandoned areas, perhaps fruit trees emerging along forests and jungle trails from seeds that had been dropped or passed through animals. Oof, I butchered the reading of that one. Or vegetables sprouting in refuse heaps at temporary camps. Lots of examples. let's forget about the examples and let's just see what we are talking about. All of this is just different examples of what we just said. So let's focus on this one. Humans probably first realized that they can have a food source, a good, reliable, dependable food source through farming, when they saw some plants growing in discarded waste, so garbage, and in abandoned areas. And then lots of examples. Let's see. Humans first saw fruit trees growing along pathways and vegetables growing on garbage dumps in temporary settlements and started cultivating them for a steady food supply. I mean, yes, kind of. Humans first saw fruit trees growing along pathways and vegetables growing on garbage dumps. Two of the examples, yes. And then humans started cultivating them, meaning farming, for a dependable, reliable food supply. I don't know why I clicked on it. I haven't even read the other ones. But it wasn't a bad option. Humans living in temporary settlements? No, we just said humans. We never said that the people who were living in one of these camps realized this. Just said humans, all humans realized this. So immediately you can ignore that one. Humans saw plants growing in waste areas, true, at temporary settlements, true, and got the idea that they could plant seeds to make sure they have a constant supply of food. Very good option. Obviously, I just clicked there. This is happening way too often. And as I said, it happened in the class. It has happened twice today. Maybe I should just leave my mouse when I talk. Because I keep just, I don't know if you hear it, but I keep clicking for no reason. Humans maintained a constant food supply, but by planting trees along pathways. No, those are wild plants and vegetables. Then people saw them, and then they started growing a food supply. So D is a terrible option. So C would have been the better between A and C. Also, with every test, generally you get a bad option, you get one that is not given, and then you get one that is close, but it's not the best option, and then you get the correct answer. Now let's see. So you can generally remove two of the options and then just put your attention on to the two that make sense. What made these cathedrals revolutionary was the way structural innovations like flying buttresses redistributed forces outward and downward, enabling builders to reduce wall thickness and incorporate expansive windows without compromising stability. Now, 1. These cathedrals were impressive. 2. Not really impressive, but that's my way of summarizing it for myself to make it easier. And let's see. You can also have your own way of summarizing things. As long as it doesn't change the information, it's fine. And later, if we actually realize one option says impressive, but the other option says they were revolutionary, meaning they caused a lot of changes, or they were the first in a series of actions that took place after them, then we can actually come and check. But for now, let's just call them they were really, really good. And what was special about them? Well, they used, let's call it FB, to distribute the load or the force outwards and downwards. I don't have a sign for it, but that's my way. If I had a piece of paper, I would just put it that way. Ward meaning in the direction of, and outward means in the direction of out from the building, and downward meaning in the direction of down. Allowing builders, so this allowed, God damn it, I'm really hungry. This allowed the builders to reduce, to make walls thinner, let's say, or less thick, which could be considered the same. And also they also started adding windows, good windows. Not something that Microsoft is familiar with in the last 20 years. Now, flying buttresses were a new decorative element. No, they weren't. They actually had a purpose. They were doing something. So they weren't just decorative. That changes the meaning. The use of flying buttresses allowed for thinner walls, correct, and large windows, correct, by channeling structural forces away from the center. That's actually a very good one. Builders in the Gothic period wanted to add more windows, so they made the walls. We never said that the reason they started doing it was something else. We never mentioned the purpose or why they started it. I mean, we mentioned the purpose, kind of, but we didn't mention why they were thinking that way. Gothic cathedrals stood out because of their height. No, we said they stood out because of the kind of structure that they were using, the kind of architecture that they were using. Is it the last one? Oh, it's the last one. Also, while you are taking the test, you can bookmark the questions and come back to them. And also click. Apparently, you cannot click. But I think it should be clickable. I will try to fix that today. And you can also use the report button here if you find something wrong with the questions. You can also go down, and at the bottom of the page, there's a comment section, so you can leave comments. And so far, there haven't been many comments, while there have been more than 10,000 viewers just this past 2 or 3 weeks. So don't be shy, just leave a comment and talk to the other people who are also taking the test. Now and to me. Let's see. This nascent word system developed new, nascent coming from, don't know the exact root, but it's from being born. Word system developed as a result of insatiable demands. Insatiable, it means we cannot saturate it. We cannot meet all the demand. We cannot make it happy. We cannot satisfy it. For non-local raw materials in different ecological regions where societies were developing along very similar evolutionary tracks toward greater complexity. So this word system, this new world system, was formed because there was lots of demand for raw materials, and 3, these materials were not local. That is important, probably. And raw materials in different ecological regions, so they were coming from other regions. And 4, let's see if we have a 4. In regions where societies were developing along similar tracks towards greater complexity. So these societies were becoming more complex. Okay. Natural reflexes. Now, as complex societies evolved in more and more regions, demands for a new world order increased. This is not really including any of the information we had here. And also, we didn't say there were more and more regions. We just said societies were becoming more and more complex. So pay attention to where we are using more and more. The new word system placed increasing demands on regions of Asia in which more complex societies had developed. No, pay attention to the time, first of all. My throat is dry. So in some areas, we had societies had already developed. Past perfect, meaning before this other thing happened, this thing had already happened. So this option is actually talking about 2 different sets of societies. One developed earlier, one developed afterwards. This is a terrible option. Less complex societies in the new world system had to demand locally unavailable raw materials from more complex societies. Again, it's mentioning 2 different types of societies. We never mentioned that. Demands by developing Asian societies for raw materials led to the emergence of a word system. So there was a new word system formed, true, and it was because of the demand by some societies, developing societies, meaning they were becoming more complex, so everything matches so far. And it was raw material available outside their territories, meaning this one. So that has to be the correct option. When you press finish, you can enter your email address to receive the results and the score that you got. And after you press see result, it tells you how many you answered, how many you didn't, the time. I passed the test. And 90%. Oh, actually, I missed 2 options. Did I misclick twice? And so yes, 18 correct answers. You can also follow me on YouTube, Instagram. I don't really use Instagram. I hope the company dies. LinkedIn, if you want to have me as your teacher, but you're not sure about my credentials, you can go to LinkedIn. Twitter, I don't use. Facebook, I hope it dies. But they are available just in case. And also, if you score high, you can get a discount code for the lessons that you are going to have in the future. Also, you can scroll down and read the whole thing. You can't review everything after you finish the test. So thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. And girls.